If you're working with Angular routing, then it might have happened to you that your application just went blank. And I can guarantee that your routes must be configured wrongly. It might be the wrong order, the missing outlet, or a lazy loading failing. Today in this video, we'll be covering everything about Angular routing basics, the edge cases which are tripping the senior developers, and the performance patterns most tutorials skip entirely. We'll build this using our Angular poster application. So let's start. Now in Angular routing, what is a route? A route is basically a plain JavaScript object that consists of a path and a component. Now where do we add these routes? We add these routes inside our app.route.ts file. Remember, this is a Angular 20 application. If you are working with older versions of Angular, then you might have the app.routing.ts file where you would add all your routing configuration. So what first path that I want to add over here is the default path. The default path is basically where the user navigates to our URL. Okay, so I'll add a path which is a blank path. Okay, and with this blank path, I'll add a component. Now this component is basically our post list component where the user will be navigated to. Whenever user navigates to our home page or the URL, then the user should be able to see all the posts. Okay, so that is why we have added the post list component here on the blank path. Now another path that I want to add over here is the add, that is a create post, because in our post list the posts are created by the users. Okay, so users should be able to create a post and that post should be visible over here inside our post list. Okay, so the next path is the add path, but before that I do not have any component where the user should be able to add the post. Okay, so for that I'll have to create a component. So I'll just open it in the integrated terminal, the components folder, and I'll create a component over here. The component creation is basically the same. We add the ng, then generate, and the component. The component would be create post component. Okay, so this is the component where the user should be navigated to whenever they want to create a new post. So I'll add a post over here. So once the create post component is created, okay, now I'll add another path over here. The path would be add. Okay, so that is the path, and after adding the path, I'll simply add a create post route. Okay, now whenever user navigates to add path on our default route URL, then the create post component should be rendered. Okay, now we have added the routes. Now how would Angular know that these routes are added and configured? Okay, so these are configured using our app.config.ts file, where this is the default method that have been added whenever I created this Angular application. All right, now this method uses the routes that we have just configured inside the app.routes.ts file. Okay, that is imported and added to the provideRouter method. Okay, this method is called inside our providers array of the application config. Okay, now if you are working with old versions of Angular, then you would have the app.module.ts file where you would import the routing module inside your main application module. Now we have created the routes and we have also added the configurations to the routes. Now where these routes will be loaded, where these components will be loaded whenever user navigates to a particular route, that is defined by a container. Okay, the container is basically called a router outlet. That router outlet loads all the components whenever user navigates to a particular URL. Okay, that router outlet is added to your parent component. Now where we have created the app.route.ts file, the parent component is basically the main component, the app component. Okay, here app post list is already created, so that is why we were able to see all the post list here. Okay, but now we'll simply add the router outlet over here, but router outlet needs to be imported from the Angular routed. So I'll head over to the app.ts file, and that the router outlet should not be imported from this place. So I'll just remove that and I'll import the router outlet from the Angular router. Okay, so once imported, I'll remove the unused post list component over here. Okay, and I'll remove the imports as well. Now once we have added the container as well, now whenever user navigates to a particular route, let's say the default route or the add route, then this component, the component that we have mentioned inside our the route config or the route object, this particular component will be loaded inside the router outlet. So this acts as a container to all the components of that particular route. Now we have added the router outlet as well, right? Now if we go inside our browser and I'll refresh the screen, okay? Now this is the default URL, okay? So that is why we are able to see the post list. Now if I go to add route and I'll just add a add path over here. Now you see the create post works. This is coming from the add post component or the create post component. Right here, the create post component works. So our routing is working properly, right? We have all the routes, and whenever we navigate to that particular route, that component is loaded. Okay. Now user will not go and type into the URL, right? So user should be able to navigate through a link or a button that should be added over here, so that whenever user clicks on that link, that the user should be navigated on that particular link or that particular route. Okay. So for that, we'll head over to our header.component.ts file where we have the main heading. Okay. And we will add the navigation over here. The navigation will be having two links, and those two links are basically the default one and the add post link. Okay. So I'll add a nav over here with a class nav. Okay. And I'll add a link. Okay. That link is basically the anchor tag. And now I'm getting an interesting suggestion from the GitHub Copilot that I should add the default route first, which is RouterLink. Now RouterLink is the directive that we need to add whenever you are trying to add a link to your particular route that we have added inside app.route.ts file. Okay. So here we'll just go through it step by step. So we'll just remove the default one. Okay. And I'll add simply the anchor tag. Now inside this anchor tag, the first thing that I want to do over is not the href, because href will redirect the user and will refresh the screen. So that's not what I want. That is not a feature of a single page application. So what we'll do, we'll just add a router link. Router link is basically creates a link using this anchor tag to your configuration that you have added inside your app.route.ts file. That is the main route configuration that is linked to your anchor tag. Okay. Now once I've added the router link over here, the router link will be navigated to the default one. So I will add a default route path over here. The default path is basically the home path. Okay. So I'll name it as home over here. Okay. And that is the default path that is mentioned using the slash. Okay. So this is the blank slash where you use whenever you want to navigate to your default URL. Okay. So I'll add a home over here. Home is basically the home page where user navigates whenever they navigate to the default URL. Okay. So instead of home, I'll just add all posts. So user should be able to see all the posts whenever user clicks on that all post. Okay. Another link that I want to add over here is that the href, which is basically the one that we just created, which is add path. Okay. Now I'll add the router link over here, and the router link would be /add. Okay. Now after adding the add route, I'll just add the add post label over here. Once I have added the label, I first want to import the router link inside our header.ts file. That router link should be imported from the @Angular router. Okay. I'll just remove the unused import over here. Now once we have added the router link as well. Okay. Now if I move to the browser and if I click on the add post, you see user is navigated to the add post or the create post component. Now if I again click on the add post, user is navigated to the default post list component. Okay. So that is how you can add the routing configuration inside your Angular application. And do not bother about the CSS of this navigation. We'll fix that later. Now what happens whenever user want to navigate to a path which is not added inside our route configuration? For example, if I go to create post, okay. So we can see a blank page as I mentioned in the start of the video. Okay. So this is how your routes are configured wrongly. If you navigate to a route which is not added inside your route configuration, then you will see this kind of blank page. Okay. To fix this blank page issue, we will add the wildcard route inside your application route configuration. Okay, so that is basically added using the double star. Okay, like this. So this is the wildcard route, and where we want the user to be navigated, that we can mention using the component. Okay, so we do not have any component over here, so we'll create a component which is not found, which is a default component, which will be shown if user navigates to a route which is not mentioned inside our routes configuration. Okay, so I'll add a component, ng generate component and the not found component. Okay, so this is our not found component. The not found component will be shown whenever user navigates to a different route. Okay, simply not found. Okay, I'll add not found over here. Now if I go inside our browser and if I type something which is not added inside our route configuration, let's say create. Okay, you see not found works is shown over here, and we can see not founds. Okay, this is coming from the not found component. So that's how you can add a wildcard route, and without a wildcard route your application will render nothing, as we have just seen in the browser. Okay, so wildcard route is the route that you should always add inside your application. Now there is a catch over here. Your wildcard route object should be added at the last. If you add the wildcard route object at the first, then your application will always render not found component, even though you navigate to a particular route which is added inside your route configuration or not. Okay, let's see inside the browser. And now if I click on the add post, you will still see the not found, and if I click on the all post, you will again see the not found component. Okay, so your wildcard route should always be mentioned at the last of your route configuration. Okay, so that's the basics of Angular routing, where we have created the default route and some other routes which is add post or create post route, and the wildcard route. Okay, in our next video we'll be seeing the dynamic path or the dynamic route. For example, whenever user clicks on this particular post, they should be able to navigate it to a different page and to see the details of this post. Okay, so that's what we'll be seeing in our next video, the dynamic path, and we'll also be looking at the nested routes which can be added inside your Angular application. So if this video was helpful to you, subscribe to the Frontend Forge and stay tuned.